Okay, next on our agenda is the Callguas Municipal Water District is going to talk to us about the water shortage emergency and water conservation measures. So, thank you.
Okay, we do have a PowerPoint presentation tonight. And you'll advance the slides for me. Okay, great. So while that's being pulled up, my name is Dan Drugan. I'm with Callguas Municipal Water District. Oh, sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
A little bit better, okay. My name is Dan Drugan. I'm with Callguas Municipal Water District. Our office is located on Olson Road, right across the street from the sheriff's station. If you've ever driven by Olson, you might remember seeing the bewaterwise.com banners out in front of our building. We are a wholesale water district. We serve water supplies to the cities and special districts and other water agencies that serve all of us at home. I'm out here in Southeast Ventura County, and I'm here tonight to talk about the drought. Very important issue for us here in the Conejo Valley for this summer and potentially likely into next year. Our title slide here shows Lake Oroville. And if you're served by Callguas Water District and you live in Southeast Ventura County, this is your water supply. Lake Oroville is a very important reservoir up in Northern California. It's the headworks of the State Water Project, and you can see the dramatic transformation from 2019 to 2021 of how that reservoir looks. That's just one tentacle of the reservoir, Enterprise Bridge. And right now in 2022, there's a little bit more water in there right now, but it will look like that later this year as summer demands start picking up on this system. Next slide. So a little bit about Callguas Water District, who we are and what we do. We were formed in 1953 by the local communities to find a supplemental water source to serve a growing Southeast Ventura County. The service area is in shaded yellow right there. You can see where we articulate here in Southern California. And we are a part of the Metropolitan Water District. We're one of the 26 member agencies that take water from Metropolitan. Metropolitan provides Callguas with State Water Project supplies. And we serve that to 19 water agencies and cities, and we serve about 640,000 people. We have about 70 employees that work at the district, many of which live in the Conejo Valley. Next slide. Key takeaways tonight for the CRPD board is that there are insufficient supplies to meet normal demands this year in the Callguas service area. This is the worst drought in the history of Callguas since water began flowing from the State Water Project into our service area in 1972. The Department of Water Resources, that's the California Department of Water Resources, they are the operator of the State Water Project, and they are prepared to provide additional water supplies to meet critical human health and safety needs. That's how bad this drought is right now. And when we start taking the human health and safety water, there is a high probability of a no outdoor water use mandate for a portion of this year as soon as September and into next year. Next slide. How did we get here? Next slide. Well, first we need to talk about the imported water system and how we receive that here in Southern California. This image right here is of California, and you can see the Northern Sierras. That's the snowpack. You can think of that as California's water bank. And how this works is there's the accumulation of precipitation and snow throughout the winter periods, leading all the way up to April, where the spring months start to occur. And then the water supplies start to melt. And so we have snowpack in the Northern Sierras that melt off in the spring and summer months down through the Feather River watershed that feed Lake Oroville, that big reservoir on the title slide. The Feather River meets up with the Sacramento River, which is fed by Lake Shasta, before draining into the Bay Delta. So all of that drains by gravity into the Bay Delta right there. And then the Department of Water Resources operates a very large pumping plant to pump that water south through the California aqueduct to Southern California. And in Ventura County, we connect up to the west branch of the State Water Project, and that's how water supplies from Metropolitan are conveyed to us. Next slide. What we also have here is the Colorado River Aqueduct that is available to the Metropolitan Water District. One reason that 2021 wasn't such a terrible drought year for Metropolitan was the ability to maximize water deliveries from the Colorado River, and they're still doing that this year in 2022. However, because of how critically dry it's been in the Northern Sierra snowpack for 3 consecutive years now, that is really a detriment to the areas that are highly dependent on State Water Project supplies, like the Callguas service area in Southeast Ventura County. Next slide. So this is it. In one slide, the issue that we're dealing with right now, it's climate change. And so for the past 10 years, even longer than that, the past 11 years, There have only been 2 years where the snowpack has been above average. And you can see in this slide, it's either feast or famine with our snowpack up north. In those 2 years where it's been above average, it's been significantly above average. And in those years where it's been low, it's been very critically low in terms of our percent of average where we should be with that snowpack. And so you can see the Governor Brown drought years from 2012 through 2016. And then we have the record-breaking storms that busted us out of the drought in California in 2017. In 2018, a critically low Sierra snowpack year. In 2019, it was another banner year for water supplies. Then now 2020 through 2022, 3 consecutive very dry years with the Sierra snowpack. Next slide. And so to recap that, it's been the driest 3 years that we've had on the State Water Project system. In December, you might recall that we had the snowiest month on record. We had record snowpack occur in December in 1 month. It was the snowiest month on record in California. And then we fell into the driest 3-month period for January through March in California history. I think that speaks to the whiplash of a water year we've just had. And that has now resulted in the lowest 3-year total water deliveries from the State Water Project system. I want to bring your attention to that bottom graphic that shows the average expectations for imports from the supply for Metropolitan should have been 3.2 million acre feet. The Department of Water Resources, that's the operator of the State Water Project, their lowest forecast, their lowest modeling forecast for water deliveries from the system should have been 1 million acre feet. Today, what we're now seeing at Metropolitan, what they're receiving is just a fraction of that 1 million acre feet. So what that tells us is that the modeling needs to change and that we need to incorporate more science and climate change-based modeling into the state's forecast into the future. Next slide. So the areas that will be impacted by the shortfall in State Water Project supplies, I'm sure you've heard this in the news, all the media that's come out about this, are right here depicted in this graphic in the shaded blue and shaded red areas. These are coined by Metropolitan, the State Water Project dependent areas within their service area. The blue shaded areas take off the west branch of the State Water Project, so that's Castaic Lake, the water supplies that come down through Metropolitan system and then conveyed to Callguas Water District. So Callguas, Las Virgenes Municipal Water District, and the city of Los Angeles are impacted by the shortfall in state water supplies. And then also to the east, there are some agencies that overlie the main San Gabriel Basin and then also the Chino Basin areas that take off of the east branch of the State Water Project. In total, it's about 6.6 million people. Next slide. A little bit more on how the infrastructure works. You can see Castaic Lake at the top and how that blue line comes down south into Granada Hills into their Jensen treatment plant for Metropolitan Water District. Supplies are then conveyed to Callguas right there at that single point of connection through the Santa Susana Mountains. And that's what the connection point for Callguas right in between Chatsworth and Simi Valley. The red line is the Callguas Municipal Water District distribution system. And if anything, this picture, I think, is to demonstrate that we are at the end of the pipe. We are at the very end of the State Water Project system. And it's very difficult when supplies are constrained, the options that we have to manage through the rest of the year when we don't have access to other sources of supply. Next slide. A little bit more on how the California Department of Water Resources is operating the system this year. We're going to talk about the Bay Delta. So next click. That's a very important area as we discuss how the department is prioritizing water supplies right now in Lake Oroville. Next slide. And it looks something like this. And so what we see is Lake Oroville at the top of this graphic, they're going to conserve as much storage as possible to flush out the salinity that's intruding from the San Francisco Bay into the Delta. I mentioned previously that water supplies all travel by gravity to the single point before pumping it south to Southern California. And if they don't maintain water quality with the available storage in Oroville, we could lose the ability to convey fresh water supplies through this estuary in the future. So in the summertime, you can see in the bottom right of this graphic for health and safety water supplies, the department is prepared to provide that to Metropolitan, but that really comes at the detriment of maintaining the salinity balance in the Delta. So when we start receiving that water supply, the state is expecting very rigorous mandatory conservation actions in order for us to receive water supplies that really you can think of as welfare, water that's not really there for water agencies that we will have to pay back actually in a future year when those supplies are available to Metropolitan. Next slide. We start taking health and safety water supplies. This is how this looks on a monthly time step. In June, that's when Metropolitan will first start taking that supply from the state. That's the reason why June 1st is the start of the emergency water conservation restrictions for the 1 day a week watering. You also see a white box at the top of June there. That's the need to conserve. And that's the big challenge ahead of us for water agencies here in the Conejo Valley, is to get out there immediately to help tell folks to conserve water and prioritize that water just for that 1 day a week for your very important critical vegetation, your trees, to preserve the urban canopy. Later on through the year, you can see that need to conserve to minimize as we start getting into those wet and hopefully cooler months in the fall later in the year. Next slide. A little bit more on this health and safety needs water supply in the state water project contract. The state is prepared to provide this supply. They are providing it right now. And it's really meant to meet demands for drinking water, sanitation, and fire suppression. It excludes outdoor watering and specifically ornamental landscaping. Next slide. And that's what this looks like right here. So with the health and safety water supplies that agencies are taking, the state's expectation for rigorous mandatory conservation, what can we do now to show the state that we are stepping up to the plate to conserve water? Next slides. And that's what the options that we have today that we just went through and adopting over the last month. And so agencies had the option to go with 1 day a week watering, or choose a volumetric allocation based on gallons per capita per day. The health and safety water supplies in the bottom slide right there, the green box, that's what that represents. The state is prepared to provide that supply based on 55 gallons per capita per day. That's the state of California indoor water use standard. And then Metropolitan has additional water supplies that they can bring down through the California Aqueduct. This is the groundwater banking that they have in the Central Valley. The other supplies that are already stored in Castaic and other state reservoirs. And that's that little increment of blue that you see right there above the green. So whatever we can do to conserve now to preserve both the blue and the green bar are very important through these next few months. Next slide. A little bit more on that concept of gallons per capita per day. It looks something like this. Every one of us uses water in and around the home. And we all have a certain gallons usage that we use each day. The community of Thousand Oaks, for example, the average GPCD for the full year is about 175 gallons per capita per day. And the majority of that water use is used in the outdoors. Approximately 40 to 70% of total use is that usage in gallons per capita per day. Next slide. So again, with this drought, what are we targeting? What's the purpose of the 1 day a week watering? It's lawns. It's lawns again. It's residential lawns, and it's also this new target that the governor has called out. It's non-functional turf. So what's the difference between functional grass and non-functional grass? Well, the CRPD manages many areas that are functional grass, areas that we recreate on, parks, school fields, other types of areas that have high recreational value for our community. The non-functional turf, those are the areas that are hiding in and around the commercial business parks, the HOAs, the other areas that aren't being used for traffic purposes with pedestrian uses, that just really are just sucking up water supplies that don't need to be done. The Southern Nevada Water Authority has been a pioneer in this in the Las Vegas Valley in terms of banning all non-functional turf grass within those medians on the street and other commercial properties in and around their area. So this was promulgated into law just recently on May 24th. The State Water Resources Control Board followed through with Newsom's executive order in late March to approve the banning of irrigation of the non-functional turf grass around businesses and institutions. Now, Callguas, we do have a rebate program to assist with any changeouts of turf, and that's the turf replacement program. Right now, it's up to $3 per square foot. So if there are opportunities for CRPD, if there are other areas that you're thinking about, that rebate program is still available for use. Next slide. So the targets for this drought, to reiterate, the non-functional turf grass, which we have some examples on the right, but also we're asking residential customers with their own ornamental turf to cut back and use that 1 day a week watering to prioritize preserving trees and the urban canopy. That's really the purpose and the goal of what we're asking for over the next few months, this summer and into the fall. Next slide. And again, the governor's executive order with the State Water Resources Control Board just adopted that non-functional turf. All the irrigation to that will be in jeopardy over the next few months. Next slide. I did want to take a moment to applaud CRPD really quick. You know, I did some research online, and it's fantastic what this agency has been able to do with acquiring more acres that it manages and still using less water than it did way back in 2007, for example. So that's a great success story. There's always opportunity, right? Opportunity to do a little bit more, to conserve a little bit more. And I think I was just talking with Tom before this meeting. one of the best ways I think that CRPD can help us with this is education and outreach. I just provided Tom with some examples of Save Our Water stickers that they can put on the trucks that drive around our community. So when folks are out there, that maybe they're watering their dog, walking their dogs, using hoses around their homes, watering those areas, they could see those stickers, and that really resonates in. That's what we're hoping for, that education component and that partnership. Next slide. To recap the drought actions, we approved our mandatory conservation program April 27th. That followed Metropolitan's action on April 26th. We saw a lot of coverage in that in the LA Times. And then now today, June 1st, that's the compliance period for the 1 day a week watering restriction. Next slide. That looks something like this. We've been putting this in the Acorn newspaper to elevate the message and urgency of the issues that we're facing right now with drought. This is not only a crisis of supply, but a crisis of communication because of how quickly this has transpired to now moving essentially to 1 day a week watering for the rest of the year. Next slide. And that's the end of the briefing. I'm more than happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions from the board? Director Lang.
Yes, I didn't hear, well, we definitely all understand the situation and the water and the reasons for the water restrictions and so forth. And, but I didn't hear any comments on plans for the future, things we should have maybe been doing 25, 30 years ago, water storage. Because, we watch the water during storms get down the
floodplains, yeah.
yes, and out to the ocean also. Are there any plans, major plans for water storage or recharging our aquifers in Southern California?
Yeah, that's a great question. You'll note that only a portion of Metropolitan Water District is impacted by this shortage this year. Metropolitan recognizes that, and they have plans to hopefully pump more Colorado River water to Callguas. Long term, Colorado River Basin is also stressed. I mean, we see the low levels in Lake Mead on that system. In terms of the flood years, like you mentioned, right, on the State Water Project, how can we take advantage of that? There are some projects on the books. Sites Reservoir, for example, which is up north in the Sacramento Valley. It's an off-stream reservoir. It's about 1.5 million acre feet. The issue with the State Water Project resources is there's not a lot of storage. Lake Mead and Lake Powell on the Colorado River side, you're talking about 40 million acre feet, right? For many states that take advantage of that resource. For Southern California, right, when we rely on State Water Project resources, it's a little under 6 million acre feet. So a fraction, of the amount of water supplies on the Colorado River Basin. In wet years, if the ability to take that water south, recharge groundwater basins, that's a really good strategy. Out here in Ventura County, Lake Casitas, for example, really low. If there's the ability to have a cross-county project between Callguas and Casitas, which we're currently working on, in a wet year, maybe we can put more of that water in Lake Casitas. And that benefits everyone in Ventura County. So there's still that low-hanging fruit out there. It takes time, right? It takes a lot of time to implement those projects. But I also cut the twin tunnels underneath the Delta, right? That's a big project. That was Governor Brown's big project. That's still in development right now. So I think at this point, it's going to take time for a lot of those projects to come to fruition.
One last question. The reservoir in Paris, California, in Riverside County area. Does Metropolitan get any water from that lake, the reservoir?
Yes, exactly. So Diamond Valley Lake was the huge investment in local storage that Metropolitan made in the 90s, right? That was huge. It was great foresight to constructed that reservoir. Unfortunately, the ability to pump that water back to northwest Ventura, well, to their northwest tip down here in southeast Ventura County is very difficult. We're limited in their capacity to do that, their infrastructure ability. So we have a plumbing issue that needs to be fixed at Metropolitan, but also how we manage through these high highs and these low lows. That's another big strategy that we need to consider in the future.
Thank you very much,
Yeah.
and thank you for the presentation. Very informative. No, excuse
I'm
me.
sorry, we only have board members talk at this point. Okay. Director Huffer.
Two questions. I know Las Virgenes has access to some recycled water. I believe it's Camarosa has access to recycled water. I know the city here in Thousand Oaks has looked at the financial feasibility of getting recycled water. Unfortunately, our treatment plant is way down a hill. Has there ever been any discussion from Callguas about somehow helping the city get some of that water back up the hill?
Right. So what you're referring to is a deal that the city of Thousand Oaks made with Camarosa Water District with the flows from the Hill Canyon wastewater treatment plant. Camarosa takes advantage of those flows downstream, pumps it back up for their own use, agriculture and some of their other users in their area. Looking at potentially to bring back from that Hill Canyon area back up, but most of that water is already subscribed and used by Camarosa. So Thousand Oaks is pretty limited based on their current agreement with Camarosa on that. Not to say that that agreement, isn't forever. That could be something that the city of Thousand Oaks looks at again when the term of that agreement comes up. But in terms of other supply reliability to the city, they looked at DeSalter near the Los Robles golf course. That ultimately it has some challenges. But Las Virgenes, the ability for them to take some of the city's water, right? Also the stormwater capture, because we have water quality issues with the stormwater systems out there. Then maybe Las Virgenes could provide some water to Callguas that could be designated to the city of Thousand Oaks, for example. So there's a lot of concepts right now. We're all still working together on them, but nothing that's immediately going to occur, I'd say, within the next 2 years.
Okay, and then my second question, totally exact. You had several slides there talking about functional versus non-functional turf. And as you said, the play fields and parks are considered to be functional turf. But one of your early slides, you said there's a very high probability of no outdoor water use. Is that any and all outdoor water use that you're talking about, a high probability?
I think there would still, what we have right now with our 1 day a week watering restriction is exemptions, right? The locally appropriate exemptions. I believe those would maintain throughout the year. So if we were to go to say a 0 day per week watering restriction, there would still be that ability to hold, I think, that exemption. We still have to talk with Metropolitan Water District about that, but it's very important, I think, to the governor's office, right? To the state of California and to Metropolitan that we keep these areas that are functional turf alive. That's a priority. So
good. Thank you.
Director Nichols or Director Holt? No. I have a question for you. When talking about the rebate for the taking out non-functional turf or functional turf, I guess, non-functional turf, do you give the rebate if somebody's put in artificial turf, or is that just for plants?
no, so it's the policy goals of the turf replacement program are to move folks to drought tolerant landscapes, native plants, other drought tolerant appropriate plants, not to artificial turf. That's been a long-standing policy goal for that program. That's the whole purpose of the program. It's not to incentivize artificial turf and that kind of installation.
I was also very interested in what the 55 gallons look like. Would it be difficult to go back to that slide where you had the pyramid and tell us what each of those categories were?
Sure, if we can pull that.
I couldn't
Slide
read them
back
from
up.
here, even with my glasses on. So I was just kind of wondering, like, like how many gallons for a shower, how many gallons for a washing machine, toilets, things of that nature.
Right. Well, without seeing it right now, the majority of the indoor water use inside the home is, you see a lot of it with toilet flushing. Showers can use a lot of water, baths can use a lot of water. Most of our appliances now with clothes washing machines are very high efficient, so they don't use as much water as they did in the past. Let's see, scroll down just a little bit there, keep going. Keep going, let's see. Keep going. There it is right there, the pyramid.
So what does that say?
Yeah, so the majority of it, you can see toilets, 16 gallons, and then you have 19 gallons with miscellaneous uses around the home for cleaning, 14 gallons, showers and baths, and then 6 gallons is consumptive, right? So that's drinking, cooking, any other types of systems you have around the home. So in total, it's about 55 gallons, right? And it's a little squishy because, if you have pets, the other, areas that use some of that water that's not explicitly called out here. This is more of a guideline for illustrative purposes only. But the majority of your water use inside the home, you can, with just 30 gallons alone, just between showers, baths, and toilets, right? So that's one
Okay.
room inside your home that's using 30 gallons out of that 55 gallons per day.
Okay, interesting. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, if there's no other questions, you still have, you always have another comment, Director Lang.